Hello, my name is Diane, and today I want to talk about The Sword Defiant by Gareth Hanrahan. This is the first book in a new fantasy series. It was also my most anticipated release of the year, and while it wasn't exactly what I expected it to be, I was definitely not disappointed. Sword Defiant follows Sir Elfric, who was one of the 9 heroes who defeated Lord Bone, took over his city of Necrad, and saved everyone from his evil presence. He is now the keeper of a cursed sword called Spellbreaker. Many years have passed since those events happened. He's no longer a young adventurer, neither are his companions. They've all kept their ties with one another. They are influential people within this world still, but their roles and their motivations have definitely changed as the world has changed because of what happened. And when we meet Sir Elfric, or Alf as he's known, at the beginning of this story, he is informed of a new dark threat that is coming, and he is sent on the beginnings of the quest to find out what that threat would be. It's a very mysterious message that he receives. It's not super clear what's coming, but he knows he needs to return to the city of Necrad after quite some time away and figure out what's going on, regroup with his companions, and hopefully stop this coming threat. I loved Alf as the main character. He's this capable, loyal hero from the legends, but when we meet him, he's much older and jaded, wandering around, kind of not really sure what his purpose in the world is anymore. He has ties to a lot of very important people, both within the world and just to him personally, and he's quite fond of all of them for different reasons, despite their varied flaws. When he returns to them after being away for some time, he quickly learns that the world isn't as black and white as it used to seem. There isn't a clear-cut good guys versus bad guys anymore. Everything's a lot more gray. His friends are now on the opposite sides of a number of issues, and he's not up to date on the politics or even the personal goings-on of these people to step up confidently and pick a side. He doesn't want to be the one calling the shots or leading the crew. He never has. It's just not within his personality. But now that he's back, the days when the 9 were united are long gone, and some of these formerly good guys are doing some really shady things, and some of the bad guys, we eventually learn, are really good people with good motivations behind what they're doing, even if what they're doing maybe doesn't seem like a good thing at face value. There's not that clear-cut good versus evil. Everything's a lot murkier, and Alf is just trying to figure it out, make the best choices he can. He wants to be respectful to the ties that he has with these people. He kind of understands where they're all coming from. He has a lot of good feelings towards all of them and wants to do right by them, but he also just wants to do right in general and stay true to his own feelings and instincts. He's put in a very tough spot, and I really liked watching him try and figure out what's really going on, try and figure out both sides of this, meet up with all of his friends and see if he can't get them all back together, because that would be the ideal solution to what's going on. But I liked watching him learn and kind of come to grips with the fact that the world isn't what it used to be. Their roles within the world aren't what they used to be, and it's very difficult to remain loyal to everyone, especially when they are so divided and there are so many of them all pursuing very different things. The world within this story is very large. There are a lot of places and politics going on. There is a huge history, which we learn some of throughout the story. Although the story centers around the city of Necrad, we get to see a number of other places, learn about the people there and their relations with one another, both through their history and their current political situation. There are a lot of strained relations between the people in the different regions and the different races that exist in this world. The story itself starts out really strong. The plot is moving right along. There's a lot of adventure and intrigue in the first part of the story. Once we get into the second part, things kind of slow down a bit, We get a lot more world building, a lot more lore. This part of the story I personally wish had some more action within the story overall, but especially this part really slows down the pace. But a lot of the lore and things we're learning about the world and the people within it become very important to the plot later on once we enter the third part and things really start to pick up again as the pace speeds up into the main conflict, the climax of this story. So although it starts out like a standard quest story, it develops into something so much more than that. Every part of the story introduces new characters, new lore, and it layers on top of itself, making it a very digestible read for such a large world with complex characters and complicated relationships between the places. There's a lot going on, but the way that it's delivered, I think, is very approachable and in a way that I think would work really well for people who are maybe interested in the epic fantasy genre but are really intimidated by the amount of information that tends to come with these types of stories. The fact that we also have very limited point of views really kept this story from running away in too many different directions. We're primarily following Alf on his adventure and learning things as he learns them. Another part of the story is told through his sister's perspective, where we see her in their home village and the journey that she gets set upon when her son leaves. And since he is the only family she has left, she sets out to find him and bring him back home where he'll be safe. And then we get occasional points of view from a third character who adds a lot of intrigue and builds on some of the mystery behind who's maybe orchestrating all of the things that are going on. Overall, I really enjoyed this. It has a lot of elements that I personally really love in fantasy stories. There are a lot of complex characters and relationships. The world is very large and the conflict isn't so clear-cut on good versus evil. There's a little bit of questioning who on the good side is actually good. There's some mystery between who you can actually trust within this world, and also on the bad side there's a good explanation for their motivations for doing things. There are a lot of familiar fantasy elements that I really enjoy that classic fantasy setting. I like the familiar roles of the characters, but I think they were done in a way that they still felt very unique. They still felt like full, well-developed characters and not just that particular trope and that is their role. Their motivations and relationships really made them feel like well-rounded characters and a very diverse cast of those different types of roles. It reminded me a lot of some of my favorite fantasy role-playing games, both video games and tabletop games. It had a lot of similar feelings of some of those stories that I personally really love, and in the best way. It really captured that feeling of that type of adventure without feeling like it was ripping anything off. I still thought that this was a very unique and engaging story. I would definitely recommend this. I think this is a great new fantasy story for people who are already familiar with this genre and these familiar fantasy elements, the classic fantasy stories. And I also think this is a very approachable entry point for people who want to try bigger fantasy stories but are maybe more intimidated by some of the well-known ones that already exist within the genre. So while I did wish there was a little more action throughout this story, I think this was a very great base for this world and introducing this large cast of characters and everything that's going on and building up to what seems like it's going to be a much more action-filled second book. There is a little bit of a cliffhanger ending. I felt like things within this particular plot, this part of the story, had some sort of satisfying closure at the end while also leaving some things unanswered, and a couple of little cliffhanger bits, some intrigue at the very, very end of the story really made me want to know what was going to happen next. So I'm definitely going to be continuing on with this series whenever the next book comes out. I am very interested to see what happens within this world and with these characters, and I had a great time reading this. It was a little bit slower reading than I had anticipated it to be, but that really allowed me to enjoy and appreciate the faster moments, the much more intriguing moments. and all of the things that were happening. Let me know if you've read this or you're planning on reading it. That's all for me today. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.